In celebration of our 10-year wedding anniversary, my wife Kathy and I decided we really needed to take a vacation together. Just the two of us, alone, without the kids. Because kids take over your life. Small tornadoes, they leave impressive paths of destruction throughout.
Dad, we completely own you. Don't forget that one, Daddy.
And that's exactly the way it should be.
Which is true. That's exactly as it should be. And this is why it's vital, from time to time, to place them in the loving, more qualified than anyone arms of their amazing grandparents. And if only for what will seem in retrospect the briefest of interludes, head for the hills. Or in our case, the Blue Ridge Mountains. We landed on a warm Sunday afternoon in mid-October at the Asheville Regional Airport in North Carolina, where Hertz offered us an upgrade to the Chevy Tahoe, whose considerable mass was made palatable by coming equipped with Sirius radio. This sonic bounty offered us a pretty steady soundtrack of bluegrass, dusty soul, and if we so desired, the chance to hear odd outtakes from the session that produced Elvis's I Can't Help Falling in Love with You.
Men say it's too drag. If I get just a little bit faster.
The parents of some old friends of ours have a cozy retreat in Burnsville, North Carolina, and kind people they are, offered us the privacy of their righteous little getaway for the first 4 nights of our trip. It's nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where it offered us amazing sunsets, foggy mountain mornings, and a multitude of lovely little ladybugs. Suddenly, an abundance of unscheduled time was ours to play with for 6 whole days. And I like to think, on that first night of our vacation, after a glass of wine or two, we settled rather nicely into its groove. So, despite myself, I've been thinking about the meaning of vacations and how central to their success is the way one values or defines leisure. Aristotle was one of the first people to try defining leisure, and he thought of it as being the freedom from the necessity of being occupied. Though for Aristotle, there were only a couple of things really worthy of troubling yourself with while enjoying this unoccupied time: music and contemplation. Now, if Aristotle were here now and I was talking to him, I'd say, well, that's part of it, sure, but I like to think the idea of leisure has evolved since then, becoming something far more expansive. And I imagine Aristotle would withhold his reply and simply nod sagely. In 2009, the U.S. Department of Labor conducted the American Time Use Survey, which provided nationally representative estimates of how, where, and with whom Americans spent their time. You'll see that on average, my particular age group is working with roughly 2.5 hours of leisure time each day, give or take a kid or two. With a vacation, however, your leisure time goes up dramatically, growing in fact to encompass just about your entire day. So the question becomes, where do you find and how do you spend your leisure when you're prepared to fully embrace it?
And what might be some good uses for your leisure time? Will you let time slip away from you? Or will you use it well?
So here's what we did with our leisurely days on vacation. 3 hikes through what fellow leaf enthusiast Professor Howie Neufeld called one of the most vibrant in recent years. The first of which was in Pisgah National Forest, where we enjoyed a fairly steep, intense hike and marveled at the silence and the vibrant colors because, hell yes, this is one of the reasons we came here, to be wowed by leaves on trees and autumn at its ripest. On the way down, I saw this sign, and despite myself, thought of this man. The second hike was off the Blue Ridge Parkway, the justly famous highway that weaves through the Blue Ridge Mountains and is equipped with plentiful scenic overlooks for folks to pull over and gander at nature's marvels, along with hiking trails that meander up into the mountains. We took a hike that began just before this tunnel, the Rattlesnake Lodge Trail, the one that leads to the ruins of an actual lodge built at the turn of the 20th century, a summer home for Dr. Chase P. Ambler and his family that sadly went on to be destroyed in a fire in 1926. We're fairly certain we ended up hiking on another trail entirely, and you know what, that was just fine. The leaves were at their most brilliant here, and afterwards we drove along the Blue Ridge Parkway, and I remembered the words of George Eliot, who once wrote in a letter to her former governess,
"Delicious autumn, my very soul is wedded to it, and if I were a bird, I would fly about the earth seeking the successive autumns."
hike we took was in the craggy mountains. To reach it, we drove up 14 miles of a dirt road that perilously twisted along a ridge before ending at the beginning of a trail that led to a modest waterfall. Though I think what we enjoyed most about this hike was coming across a recently fallen tree, the massive root architecture of which offered itself up to us in a gnarled primal display. We also watched movies, the first two on DVD. The American, where Clooney plays a suave and sullen professional assassin who seems to have wandered off the set of a Michael Mann film. And Salt, with Angelina Jolie, saving the world from evil Russian men she was brainwashed with as a child when she was stolen from her parents and made into a communist fighting machine. And on rainy afternoons, we saw a couple movies on the big screen at the Carolina Movie Theater in Asheville, where you can take a nice local beer poured from draft into the theater with you. The first was Contagion, where a pandemic sweeps across the planet, killing millions in its wake, including Gwyneth Paltrow and Kate Winslet, which made me very sad. And the second, and last film of our trip, The Ides of March, where the viewer learns that politicians and their helpers are oftentimes ruthlessly ambitious, manipulative, and cynical. I drank a delicious draft beer while I watched it, though it left virtually no aftertaste. Between us, we read 4 books. I read Steve Martin's minimalistic autobiography about his time spent as a stand-up comedian, Born Standing Up, which was pretty good.
Well, excuse me!
A Visit from the Goon Squad, which was pretty awesome, then dragged a bit before becoming pretty awesome again. And lastly, The Family Fang. And Kathy read Game of Thrones. For the last couple nights of our trip, we left our hilltop refuge and headed into Asheville proper, staying at the Haywood Park Hotel, which was formerly a department store, and had this following menu. Now, Asheville boasts a surprisingly dense and vibrant local food scene, where the farm-to-table ethic has become the standard and menus change to reflect the season. Plus, there's a thriving microbrew movement. So, let's see. Locavore food scene with a ton of enthusiasm, along with a large collection of craft beers to wash it all down with? Sweet. We ate at the following Asheville establishments. Breakfast at the Sunny Point Cafe, where there was a porous parking lot with an accompanying sign about why there was a porous parking lot, in addition to being home to one of the softest, most delectable little pumpkin cookies I've ever had. Lunch at the Tupelo Honey Cafe, where I'm fairly certain I enjoyed one of the best burgers I've ever had the pleasure of titillating my tongue with. Dinner at the Mila Indian Cafe, which was rated the best restaurant by Asheville's food-centric free weekly, The Mountain Express. Though, of all the restaurants we ate at, it's the one that left the least impression. We had another dinner, this time at the Cucina 24, where our waiter was also the restaurant's bartender, and he was smooth with southern charm, and set us on our merry way with an after-dinner scotch and port. And, lastly, a breakfast at the Early Girl Eatery, which was cute. And, it's really hard to disappoint me at breakfast, it just really is. And I had a perfectly acceptable grit cakes with poached egg dish here. Our bellies full, our desire to immerse ourselves amongst autumn leaves at peak season sated, our leisure time happily coming to an end, we returned home, to the great mess, the tyranny of clocks, to being occupied by necessity, and to these two, to this one and this one, which is just as it should be.